So this is Stuart Card. You were a associate adjunct professor or an adjunct associate professor at Syracuse University until quite recently. And I read your open letter about the situation at Syracuse where some frat boys had a standard crude initiation ceremony.
Back in my part of the woods, we do it like this. It's called anointing. I solemnly swear to always have hatred in my heart for niggers.
Spicks!
Most importantly, finish the sentence. The what, Aaron?
The fucking kags.
To joke that I love black cock. I just go to town.
What the fuck is happening? What the fuck, you're uncircumcised, you fuck?
That leaked out, and I don't know if the university overreacted or reacted appropriately, but they asked for your feedback about the situation, and you gave it to them, and from what you posted online, they let you go.
Right. So, on the one hand, I was only an adjunct to begin with, so it's not like the university has any ongoing obligation to me, but there was a pretty good track record of over a period of years them using me reasonably frequently as an adjunct. So that was a relationship that the department and I expected to continue until recently. As far as the university's reaction to the fraternity's activities, I can't say what may have been appropriate, but I think that what I observed was inappropriate. For one thing, simply the speed of response was such that there was no way that due process could have been observed. There was no way that people on both sides of the issue could have had an opportunity to express their view or even give their evidence before there was a rush to judgment.
And that is kind of disturbing at a university that is founded, or perhaps was founded at some point, or comes from a tradition of the Socratic method of searching out truth and looking at things from a variety of levels and coming to a judgment that takes in a lot of detail.
Right. And what I think is hilarious, perhaps it's not the right word, is that this is all in the name of protecting free speech and diversity.
Yeah. Wait, what do you mean by that? How is it protecting free speech and diversity to... Well, I guess the videos that I saw maybe had some, insensitive behavior, but like you brought up, like within context, if you don't look at context, then how are you going to interpret if something is, even if it's rude, if it's malicious? How do you know about intentionality if you don't look at context? And how can a university not look at context and still call itself a place of higher learning or of deeper thought?
Right. No, my point as far as attempting to protect diversity and free speech is that the prevalent myth is that groups that have traditionally been in less power than the adult white male who has basically controlled the country for a couple hundred years are reluctant to speak out because their speech could get them into trouble. And so we have to create this safe space in which minorities can express their views, women can express their views, et cetera, which so far as the intent of that goes, fine. But the implementation of that concept is to create a safe space in which people are not merely free to express their perhaps minority views, but rather in which they are protected from the views that are perhaps regarded as inimical to them. And so my view was one that was regarded as dangerous, oppressive, and therefore not to be tolerated.
And what do you think about the intention to protect certain classes?
I'm a big fan of protecting individuals, not groups.
Yeah.
I don't believe in the concept of group rights. I believe in the concept of individual rights. But again, this notion is passé currently.
And have you seen that change of attitude ramp itself up, or do you think it was already there and it just came to prominence somehow?
I've observed it ramping up for 30 years.
Okay. From
when I was a master's student at Syracuse University, through my time as a doctoral student, and then through my time there as an adjunct. And most of the time as an engineer, I just grit my teeth over what I regard as silliness and move on and do my work, because that's what engineers do. We don't typically get involved in political discussion, et cetera. Yeah. And I wouldn't have gotten in political discussion in this instance. When this hit, when the video was first leaked, it took literally 10 minutes for the campus to go insane. And within 10 minutes of the leak of the video, I was receiving tweets and emails and Facebook postings and all manner of communications indicating how horrible this video was. And all right, it was in poor taste, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And the general concept was that members of the campus community were being damaged by their simple awareness of the existence of the video. People who had not even watched the video were deemed to have been harmed by their knowledge of its existence. And so we were encouraged to provide counseling and give people extra time to complete their projects and perhaps delay their final exams and make all of these accommodations for students who were so deeply emotionally wounded over their simple knowledge that a video existed that they had not actually viewed.
Do you think that to a certain extent this that whole maneuver of counseling and super protection and super sensitivity, do you think it's based on liability or on ideology?
I think it's a little of both, and there's a third element as well. The liability component might not be so much a matter of traditional legal liability, but of seeking to avoid consequences that have been observed all too often in the past couple of years in academia. Deans and chancellors and college presidents find themselves out of a job if they don't roll over and accede to mob rule. And frequently the mob rule is not even actually that of a majority mob, but of a vocal minority mob. One of our past presidents who definitely had some problems as a politician in a democratic republic, Richard Nixon, liked to talk about the vast silent majority. And it's out of fashion to refer to the vast silent majority, but I think he was right on with that phrase, even if in some other aspects of his presidency he left a lot to be desired.
Yeah. Yeah, that mob, that very small vocal minority, it seems, has so much power to it that I don't know how it can't be just certain people with certain characteristics, or certain people who see an opportunity know that if they say certain things or if they stand for certain principles, they can shut down and steamroll everybody else. It seems very dangerous.
Right. And that feeds into the third element that I think was in play, which is what I call the mythical monoculture, or the monocultural myth. Put the words in whichever order you prefer. In agriculture, a monoculture is a huge field that's planted with all one crop, and year after year after year it's planted with that same crop. And it's been recognized in the last few years that this leads to all sorts of problems. The soil becomes depleted, insect pests proliferate, etc. And yet what we have learned is a bad idea in botany is something that we do culturally. The monocultural myth is that the entire campus community, and indeed all intelligent, educated, right-thinking people, agree on certain things, when in fact we don't. I regard myself as moderately intelligent and moderately well-educated, and I do not agree with the monoculture that is purported to be the uniform thinking of all, as I say, educated, reasonably intelligent people. And I wouldn't have voiced my opinion, as I have not voiced my opinion for 30 plus years, except that I was asked.
Yeah.
An administrator highly placed in the college hierarchy, as the nth of the many emails that were circulated suggesting how we needed to make all of these special allowances for these deeply emotionally wounded people, asked for my input. And it requested that the input be sent just to the administrator, not a reply to all.
Yeah.
I replied as requested. I sent my reply to the administrator. I did not CC anyone. It was a very brief reply, and it was not any kind of a quest on my part. It was not an attempt to convince the university to come around to my point of view. It was merely a statement that I disagreed with and disapproved of the administration's handling of this case.
Yeah.
And I expressed that I had been toughened up as a youth by the bullying that I underwent. Now, that didn't mean I approve of bullying. It just says that one of the consequences of bullying often is to toughen up the victim. And that I think it's a disservice to the students to attempt to put them in padded rooms where there is no possibility that they will be exposed to even ideas that they might find upsetting, much less actual bullying.
Yeah.
That, unfortunately, is regarded as a dangerous position, and I am now regarded as a positive danger to SU students. And I am not supposed to interact with SU students without a full-time tenured faculty member present to supervise me as a nanny.
Are you serious?
I wish I were not.
Oh, geez. That is insane. That's
Yes,
crazy.
I'm a clear and present danger.
I'm sorry to laugh. That's just so ridiculous.
Laughter is the only possible response.
Well, I'm not going to storm the campus and protest. But I will mock them online. What do you think about this inflation? Because looking at the video, and maybe I'll have to edit this and throw in the video clips beforehand so people know what we're talking about, but I guess they said the quote-unquote N-word a few times, and they used the R-word, which is maybe, if I recall correctly, and there was some wagging around of metaphorical phalli. I mean, it's just basically very crude masculine behavior, but and it's all done in good taste. I even see one dark-skinned individual in that room, and he's laughing along with everybody else. But the inflation, what do you think about the inflation of the concept of bullying to mean anything slightly, what you said, poor taste or off color? What does that do to our ability to communicate, our ability to laugh, our ability to actually engage with ideas and laugh off things that don't matter, but rather inflate them and cause microaggressions to be the currency of the day?
I think it weakens us as individuals, and it weakens us as a society. Again, I don't look back with fondness on the beatings that I took as a kid, but I also know that they prepared me for a real world in which sometimes things can get a little rough. And until we make the real world, all of it, a safe space, we can't afford for our educational institutions to be a, quote, safe space. Because a safe space does not prepare you for an unsafe space.
Yeah.
And it makes us weaker as a society in that the free interplay of ideas, even bad ideas, in which the good ideas hopefully rise to the top through debate and trial and error, that's what Darwinian evolution has produced us biologically. And arguably, if you believe in Hegel, the same thing has led to most of modern science.
Progress, yes.
Now, I'm not a Marxist, but I am kind of a fan of Hegel's idea of the war of ideas.
Yeah. Of ideas duking it out and producing refinement or a synthesis between them. Is that what you would say the war of ideas is?
Sometimes synthesis, and sometimes an idea is just proven to be fallacious.
Yeah. I want to play the devil's advocate. I agree with you, but I want to play the devil's advocate to see if there is some way that we can see safe spaces as tenable. Could it be the case that if universities train students to act very hyper-aware and hyper-safe with one another, that will leak out into the corporate sphere and the real world, so-called, and eventually create a safe space? Do you think that it's possible that people believing in safe spaces will eventually just cause the world to become a safe space?
It already has leaked out into the corporate world, and it's had precisely the opposite effect of that which is intended. I've spoken to friends who are in corporate America since my incident of a few weeks ago, and it was made clear to me that had I said that in their corporate environment, I would have met the same fate.
Okay. But do you think that the corporate world is becoming a safe space, or do you think it's masking the actual aggression by causing it to just basically undergo an evolution? Aggressive behavior transforms itself. It's still there, but it's masked under all these politeness, like this neo-Victorian morality is still masking basic aggression and dominance hierarchies, stuff like that.
Not only that, I would say more than that, it is bottling up aggression that if a little steam were let off from time to time would not build to such intensities.
Oh, yeah.
And it also means that if I want to discuss one of these unacceptable ideas, I need to discuss it only with other people who will not rat me out. And other people who will not rat me out are those with whom I already probably agree to some extent on this and related ideas. Yeah. So now we get this incestuous reinforcement of ideas, be they true or false, with other members of my group. And we do not get the interplay with other ideas. Years ago, actually, when I was in high school, I used to subscribe to both the Greenwich Village Voice and to a newspaper called The Spotlight, the newspaper you can trust, which was so right-wing, it is hardly to be comprehended today. And my assumption was that if I read a piece in the Greenwich Village Voice and a piece in The Spotlight on the same issue, I might somewhere in between find the truth. We simply don't have that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think it will lead in effect to an atrophy of the critical faculties?
Absolutely. And I observed that in the classroom as well.
Really?
At the time this all took place, I was not teaching at Syracuse University. I was teaching at a sister institution, the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry, SUNY ESF, which is co-located with SU on the same campus. And the class I was teaching was in computer programming, but for people in the biological sciences and forest industries, because a modern paper plant is all run by computer. Yeah. And at the beginning of the semester, when I would give a programming assignment, I would get back a jumbled hash of computer syntax that was semantically null. And I would get back a mini essay saying why they thought it ought to work. And the concept of objectively this program either runs or it doesn't seems to be lost upon the majority of the students. But here's the good news. In a matter of 3 to 4 weeks, when I held the bar up and refused to lower it, and in every class session explained, this is not a political science class, a history class, an English class, where you can defend a position that fundamentally the positions are subjective in any event.
Yeah.
This is an objective subject matter. Programs run or they don't run. Yeah. They produce mathematically correct output or they produce something other than that. And this is the standard to which you would be held. After 3 to 4 weeks, the whole class was with me, and they were not writing the code of an experienced programmer, but they were writing rational code that produced more or less correct outputs, and that they understood that it was indeed an objective affair. And my concern is that the objective sciences and engineering disciplines perhaps the last bastion of objectivity, are now being corrupted with the notion that, well, a program that doesn't run but you can defend why you thought it ought to is acceptable.
Wow. Yeah, that derails the path to mastery of the world, of the intersubjective or the objective world. To think that, or to teach, or to allow students to believe that an ought is prior or more privileged than an is, especially when you're grinding up pulp and you're using tremendous machinery that's, flaying trees. I mean, maybe there's an ought in how we should manage the environment for sure, but how you actually process the environment, even then, even if you want to be an environmentalist, you need to look at reality and have roots in reality in order to affect the outcome that you desire, and understand how to affect the outcome that you desire. And if that's derailed to begin with, what's going to happen?
Right. I don't dispute that subjectivity and opinion have their place. But we should know where the one begins and the other leaves off. Yeah. It is not possible to repeal the law of gravity. Congress could attempt to repeal the law of gravity, but the apple will still fall on my head with whatever the consequences are.
Yeah, but at least Congress can force you to wear a padded helmet wherever you go. So you'll have the safe space with regards to gravity's working upon you, but still. Yeah, that's crazy. So you're obviously concerned, and I guess you lost one job. You're still teaching at other places?
Well, we'll see. The semester is over. We'll see whether I get invited back anywhere. Fundamentally, my concern has almost nothing to do with my termination, because I am an engineer in private practice, and teaching is something that I do because I think it's an ethical obligation of a professional to contribute to the education of the next generation of professionals in his discipline. Yeah. And I also enjoy it. And I'm sure that I benefit indirectly from my interaction with young people who have different ideas than my own. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to miss teaching. Perhaps after this all blows over in a few years, I'll be invited back. Who knows? But my concern is more for the full-time faculty, people who make a living doing this. I can afford to kiss off an adjunct gig, but somebody whose mortgage payment and food and medicine for their family depends upon continuing to receive their academic paycheck, they don't have the luxury of speaking their mind as I did. They have to just bite their tongue for 40 years. And my even larger concern is for the students. They're not being properly prepared for the world. They're not getting the education that they ought to get as a liberal education. And finally, my concern is ultimately for the long-term consequences for our society. Mm-hmm. So really, my job is neither here nor there.
Yeah, but your concern is valid, and I wonder if you have any ideas or if you're taking measures to help kind of turn the tide or steer the Titanic in another direction, or if it's possible at this point with academia.
Well, I feel kind of like the apocryphal story of the man walking down the beach flinging starfish back into the sea, and who is told that he could not possibly make a difference. If you just look at the numbers, my one small protest voice is extremely unlikely to have any significant effect. But for me, it was simply a matter of conscience. When I was explicitly asked my position on what the university was doing and should do, I felt that to remain silent was to tacitly give my assent, my approval, and to be complicit in something which I felt was wrong. And so I simply voted my conscience, and I was pretty sure that it would lead to my termination, and 2 hours later it did.
Wow, 2 hours.
So, 2 hours, yes.
This behavior is so reflexive. It's infantile. It's subhuman. It's just a basic reaction.
Yeah, it's being driven by fear. Now, fear is a legitimate emotion. It's there to keep us out of the jaws of lions, right? But I don't know. Have you ever watched or read Dune? The human is able to put his hand in the box where the neural stimulator causes pain, and he can control his reaction to the pain.
Yeah.
Rational beings should not be reflexively driven by fear.
Yeah. And I guess the question, another question, or to rephrase my question, how do we galvanize the courage of this silent majority? Or are they just going to be slowly eroded and eroded and eroded, and along with the disciplines, their ability to have integrity?
Well, I wish I knew the answer to that question, and if I did, I might actually embark upon a crusade, which I haven't done because I don't have the answer to that question.
Yeah.
The only thing that I can say that's hopeful is that the world has seen this before. The Dark Ages came, the Dark Ages went. Hopefully these Dark Ages won't last as long or be as severe.
Yeah, well, it just seems that with how advanced our society is and how many people there are and how reliant we are on technology and engineering and the sciences, not only to maintain our way of life, but to refine it into the future as things change, because they will change, it seems that a catastrophe is awaiting us simply if we don't have the engineers. Maybe we'll have to import them from China, from places that don't have safe spaces, who are taught objectivity.
Right. So that's going on, of course, already. I recruit from the American university system, and a lot of my work is defense work. And it is much easier for me if I hire natively American English-speaking, natively North American-born U.S. citizens in defense work, right? But I frequently find myself hiring foreign nationals and needing to compartmentalize them away from the truly sensitive information, because I have a hard time finding people born here in the 50 states who have the skills that I need.
Wow. So you're outsourcing under duress of a dearth of competency. That's
right.
Crazy.
I mean, it's not that these people don't exist. I'm not going to claim that there aren't any U.S.-born competent engineers. Of course there are. But the supply is certainly not adequate to meet the demand. And so I frequently have to justify to my military customer why I am using a foreign national on a military job. And the answer is, only guy I could find who had the skills.
Oh, wow. I've seen, this is kind of a tangent, but I've seen people in institutions of higher learning and in corporations and the professional private sector, people who base their decisions on rationality and on logic and on objectivity. These people are being run out of even businesses that are supposed to be providing a good product, a solid product. So it seems that even the people who are being trained and taking their studies seriously, they're having a hard time finding work, because if they actually have a skill set that's based in objectivity, they have to know where to hold that rationality at bay so that it doesn't offend people.
Right. So I'm not in the big corporate world, but it certainly looks to me like the path to CEO, which used to run through development and production line engineering and manufacturing, now runs through the various staff and support roles that are there to keep regulators happy and keep what would otherwise perhaps be protesters or boycotters happy.
Wow. So the people who end up in charge, just to restate what you're saying, the people who end up in charge are people who have a high tolerance for paperwork and meetings and compromise on the ought or the human sphere, the subjective sphere, but don't necessarily have their hands and don't have a mastery in the objective sphere and the outcomes that are actually desired.
That is my perception. And I have to admit that it is merely a perception of somebody on the outside looking into the Fortune 500 world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody dropped just the other day, I don't know exactly what they mean, but somebody said that MBAs are kind of slowly taking over the corporate sphere, and they're basically trained middle management. They're trained management, which is secondary management, administration, red tape is secondary to the actuality of profit.
I hate to see somebody running a shoe company who's never made a pair of shoes.
They can make nice shoes that are humanely built, but are they are they going to have good arch support?
Right.
So I guess I worry about, I guess, whatever this is, this social justice, progressivism stuff. It seems to be persecuting on the behest of anti-oppression. It's persecuting. On the surface, it persecutes the dominant, statistically dominant individuals. But in actuality, it's persecuting people who prize, like I said, competency and mastery. And I guess we've already talked about this, but I hope that there's a way that we can reverse the tide, one, before there's a backlash on the social sphere, because I think that people are getting more and more upset with this kind of behavior, but also a backlash in the actual sphere where our infrastructure... Where
bridges fall down.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want bridges to fall down. So that's a whole nother conversation we could have on another day. The fragility of our modern world, which consists of so many complex and interdependent networks. I have some pictures I can draw you that illustrate exactly how problem this has become. That problem is one that I work to address actually in my business, trying to develop products and technologies that make our communications infrastructure more resilient in the advent of, say, an electromagnetic pulse or a solar storm or something like that. But back to our topic of today, I can sum up my 3 allegations against the academic establishment in these United States. First, in attempting to encourage the exercise of free speech by some, you have, the you here being the academic establishment, you have suppressed its exercise by others. Mm-hmm. My second charge is that in attempting to open the minds of your students, you've closed your own minds. And my third charge against the academic establishment is that in an attempt to halt any and all forms of bullying, you have yourselves become bullies. Mm-hmm. Those are my 3 charges, and I await answers from the establishment.
I will issue these charges, and hopefully there's a court somewhere, be it public opinion or maybe a class action lawsuit at some point, that will force these charges to be answered.
Thanks. Terrific talking with you today.
Yeah, absolutely, Stuart. Thanks for standing up. Thank you very much for standing up. I think that you're not the only one. I would highly suggest, if you care to contact the Heterodox Academy and give them your letter. I'm sure that they would publish it if you've heard of them. And I'm glad that I think that more and more people like you will come to the fore. The more people stand up, the more people will stand up. So,
thank you.
Thanks. Right. And you do defense work and communications. That's fascinating stuff. So you're working on the actual infrastructure, not necessarily the code, I guess, or how those two things fit together?
Well, sadly, I've gotten too far in my career to really do the hands-on technical work myself. All I get to do is manage people. But yeah, we're working on anything from the cellular LTE, long-term evolution infrastructure, to radios for the military and the Homeland Security folks and police and fire and other first responders. My big fear is that this complex interdependent web will all come crashing down around us for any of a variety of different causes. And I would just like to make the web more robust and resilient.
Yeah.
And there are ways to do that, but unfortunately, like anything else, it involves expending resources. And nobody likes a pure insurance play, right? You don't want to pay for insurance.
Yeah.
You want your claim to be paid if you ever have to submit one, but you don't really want to have to pay premiums month after month after month when nothing's going wrong. And so, investing in backup servers is not anything that any CEO or CFO wants to do, even though their CIO says it's essential to maintain the corporate information in the event of, something bad happen where the primary servers are.
That's a very hard sell, especially with shareholders having their say and things. It seems like you've earned your management position then.
So I have the net sum of my management training is reading 2 books and attending a 1-day seminar.
But you worked your way up. Like this is like the traditional kind of, I guess, the trade path toward this position, to be able to oversee everything because you've seen how every bit of it works.
Yeah. So I have the luxury, if you can call it that, of being in my own small company.
Okay.
And so I didn't climb the corporate ladder. I constructed the corporate ladder beneath myself.
Yeah. Which is the classic American dream or ideal.
Someday it might even pay off.
Oh yeah, right. Wow. This is an excellent talk. I'm going to post it, if you don't mind, up to where
Sure.
we ended. I think that my viewers will get a kick out of it, and I'm going to forward it to some heavy hitters, and maybe you'll get some traction. I think your voice definitely should be heard, and you should submit your letter places if you feel up to it. I think that it will actually have an effect.
Okay. So the only effect that there were 3 things that I was looking for in posting my screed. The first one was selfish. My friends and family and coworkers know that I've been associated with SU since 1985. Mm-hmm. And they were going to wonder, why is Stu not there anymore? What happened?
Yeah.
And so I wanted them to understand that I didn't do something repellent in the back room. I simply spoke my mind. The second reason for my posting what I posted is in the probably vain hope that somebody somewhere who has not yet been completely brainwashed and is still open to, external stimuli might see it, and it might possibly tip them into seeking contrasting opinions rather than hiding from them. Mm-hmm. And then my third and final, probably vain hope is that maybe a few people who, like me, have the luxury of speaking their mind and suffering the consequences will do so. And then if enough people who have the luxury of doing it without horrible consequences do it, then maybe it'll get a little bit viral and start to leak into the world where people are actually going to have to pay a price for voting their conscience.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are admirable goals. I don't think they're foolhardy. They might be vain in certain respects, but I think that they'll pay off. And if nothing else, then you can look back and say that you did the right decision, or else I'm going to say you did the right thing.
Well, I'd do it again today, knowing what happened. Mm-hmm. So.
Did they?
Now, maybe 10 years from now, I'll look back and say, what an idiot I was. I should have worked within the system. I should have said nicer things. I should have tried to bring people gradually around to see the light rather than, smacking them in the face with it. Who knows?
Yeah. And do you expect any blowback from the administration, or you guys are just done with each other now? There's no investigation from your side or theirs?
So again, because I was an adjunct, neither one of us has any ongoing obligation to the other.
Okay.
During the course of a semester, I have the obligation to finish teaching the class, and they have an obligation to pay me to do that. Once the semester's over, there's nothing after that. And that's fine, right? I respect the university's right to choose their staff. I merely feel that they are making bad decisions with respect to the proper training of our students and decent respect to our discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
yeah,
I don't know.
It's very. I think respect is a good way of framing it.
So I don't know. This is more of a pain for my wife and my coworkers than it is for me, because my business partner here has got to deal with the issues that this. See, we also work with Syracuse University as consultants on some of our jobs.
Yeah.
So now my business partner has got to talk with highly placed people at the university and say, our company would still like to work with your university, even though our chief scientist is no longer welcome on your campus.
Really, you're banned from campus?
Almost, not quite. I can physically be present on campus, but they don't want me interacting with Syracuse University students without a nanny present.
Jesus Christ.
Who knows? I might beat them up.
You might bully them for their better good. Oh, geez.
So actually you might want to turn the camera back on for this because
I'm still recording. I'm still recording. I was just going to cut it.
Okay.
We
all right.
keep on
So
going,
here's. So when this all blew up, I had a couple of interactions that suggest to me that perhaps my views are not completely distorted. When I told my SUNY ESF class what had happened, they were astonished. And a number of them stood up and said, look, I knew what was going on with this fraternity. I looked at the videos, and yeah, they were crude, but they're no big deal. I didn't feel harmed by seeing these videos. And one student stood up and said, look at me. Look at the color of my skin. I have been discriminated against for real. I have experienced bigoted behavior. He said, I can tell it when I see it. The facial expressions, the gestures, the nuances of speech. It's pretty clear when somebody really does think less of me because of the color of my skin. And those videos, that was not what was going on. It was obvious. You didn't even need to be provided context. Nobody needed to tell you that it was satire. 30 seconds into it, you knew it was satire. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's one thing. And then I went to one of my several jobs where I'm the eminence grise. I don't do anything useful. I just kind of mentor the junior staff and try to guide them into more productive paths, keep them from dead-end technical avenues. Mm-hmm. I went to a couple of the guys and I said, all right, I know it is very difficult for you to answer this question honestly because we're in a situation of unequal power. Although I'm not your boss, I'm senior staff and management listens to me and you're junior staff. I get it. But please try to answer me as honestly as you can. In all of the interactions we've had in the several years that you've been working here, have I ever intellectually bullied you or made you feel like you must believe as I believe, you must do it the way I told you to do it? And now if I had ever done any of those things, I would have expected them to say, no, of course not, you haven't, because of the situation of unequal power. But I got to read their body language too, and it was hilarious. When I asked them the question, the first thing that happened is expressions of disbelief crossed their face. They're like, what are you talking about? What can you possibly mean? And once they understood that I was not joking and that I was referring to this situation at SU, they burst out laughing.
Huh.
So the kids get it.
Yeah. Many
of them. It's the 30-something and 40-somethings in administration that don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's another source of hope, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those, what we can call the kids, the millennials, I think a small subset know that they can get a bunch of power by playing into the hands of this thing, of the 30s and 40s, my generation. But I think that the vast majority of the millennials are going to get pretty sick and tired pretty quick of being bossed around and pushed around by this small contingent. And I'm sure that they will, my job, or I conceive of my job as giving tools to limit the power and to deconstruct the far left or progressive mindset, or whatever this is, and to hand this over to young people to see that you're not alone and this is ridiculous, and trust your gut if you think this is ridiculous. So I do have hope. It's just I have to kind of swat around the people my age who are allowing this behavior to happen.
Right. And you mentioned the whole millennial thing, so I'll go there for just a second as well. Mm-hmm. Even though I turned 55 day before yesterday, I'm the last year of the baby boom. Somehow I found myself as the bridge between the millennials and the boomers in one of my workplaces. Now, I am a boomer through and through. I'm bought into the workaholic mentality and so on. But at the same time, one of the most important lessons I was ever taught was it didn't sound stupid to the guy who said it, right? So you should look for why he thought that what he said made sense. And so I try to understand the millennials, and I don't totally grok them, right? But I try to understand them. And so periodically, the boomers will rant at me about what they're getting from the millennials, and then I'll go off in a corner with a couple of millennials, and we'll try to sort it out. And it frustrated the heck out of me as a boomer that, to begin with, all the millennials in the workplace wanted a pat on the head on a daily basis, whether they had actually accomplished anything that day or not. And we got through that. And what I've found is, now that the bar has actually been held up and pointed out, and it's been explained that, yeah, we appreciate your efforts, but what we really care about is your results, right? Once that's been made clear, now these same people who wanted a pat on the head, deserve it or not, now they really enjoy and relish a challenge and producing a real result. And so what I have to say to my fellow boomers is, it's not the millennials' fault. It's our fault. Stop giving them the damn daily pats on the head. Hold the bar up. Tell them why the bar needs to be held up. For a while, it's going to be ugly. But then they're going to get it, and they're going to perform, and they're going to enjoy performing far more than they ever enjoyed an unmerited pat on the head.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that there's a learning curve for sure. And the longer you stretch out that ugliness, the more and more unsatisfying they're going to be, the more unsatisfying everybody's going to be, and the results aren't going to be there until the rubber has to meet the road at some point. And is that not what college's job is to do? To teach kids that here's the bar, we're gonna give you all the help that you need, but you're gonna have to do it, and that's the only way that you're gonna own it.
Yeah, a lot of my professors when I was an undergraduate had gotten their training in Europe. And being educated in an American university today is way different from being educated by somebody who's basically Prussian.
That is very true. Yeah, very true. Well, let's wrap it up there. And if you want to talk again, you dropped a hint at something about infrastructure I would love to spend some time talking to you about.
Sure. So I'll give you it's either a teaser or it's what do they call it when you tell somebody? A spoiler. All right, here we go. This is a spoiler. You can take two networks, each of which on its own is extremely robust, and by introducing a dependency between these two networks, to wit, our communications network needs electrical power to run the routers and the switches. Yeah. And our electrical power grid needs a communications network so we know where there's surplus power being generated and where there's a demand, so we know where to route the electricity, right? So these two networks, each of them is actually very robust on its own. But now, just in the last few years, they've been made interdependent. And the interdependence of two robust networks can yield an extremely fragile network.
Yeah.
And I can draw a picture of this with only 3 internet routers and 3 electrical power switching substations, and show how the whole thing can collapse.
Yeah. From
a trivial cause. And so this is, I know this is a little outside of the realm where you usually do your blogging, but this is a lot more of a clear and present danger than I am to the SU students.
Yeah, right. Yeah, what would they possibly do without their cell phones? Or running water,
all right.
for that matter.
You have a good day.
All right, you too, Stuart. Thanks a lot for talking.